far I was talking to you about the idea that we are made out of different materials, of different essences that pull us into different directions. Our material body that corresponds with the dust from which it has been shaped and taken out of is always subject to the law of gravity, both physically and spiritually. Because the body wants to always participate in the life of the material world. The body needs to eat, the body needs to sleep, to drink, and to feel pleasure. Sexual pleasure is also part of the necessities of the body. And so basically, the story of the fall corresponds with the idea that Adam allowed the voice of the material world around him to speak into his ears and drag him down into the lower and basic existence, which is animal-like. And from that moment on, the civilization that has been developed outside of the garden is subject to the animal skins that we wear. There are a few things that drive this civilization: survival, desire for power, and domination, which is also part of the animal world, and pleasure. But these are animal-like instincts. Animal sexuality, animal morality, animal life of existence of survival. Okay, let me give you one more proof text of what I'm saying here, because it might hang in the air for you. These stories, since they're a matrix, not just an explanation of what really happened, this story is a matrix that explains to us or to you the way life is, the way life runs. There were two brothers born of the same mother, and they were fighting so hard in her womb that she thought that she's going to die, but she eventually gave birth. And the two brothers, upon their birth, were still fighting. And one of the twins that came out second was holding the heel of his brother. The first one, who was very strong and grew up to be a very great hunter and a strong man, was called Esau. The younger one, if a twin can be younger, a few minutes younger, was Mama's boy. He stayed in his mama's tent learning how to cook lentils. Okay, so one was a symbol of this strong man who wears animal skin. Do you remember that he was quite hairy? And that is his name. So basically he was as hairy as an animal. And so when Jacob had to cheat his father to have his brother's blessing, he took a piece of goat's skin, so his blind father would touch his hand and think this is his brother. Remember? It corresponds with this, Adam being dressed in animal skins, right? So Esau is the kind of a man who learned how to survive out of the garden, who turned his back to his spirituality and to his heavenly origin or belonging. And so, upon his arrival at home one day, after chasing a wild animal, he was so tired and so weary that he needed food, right? And so, you know, when animals need food, they become outrageous, right? So he comes like an outrageous animal that needs to eat something, right? And his brother has just finished cooking lentils after his mother's recipe. And his brother says, Esau says to Jacob, please give me to eat from this. And Jacob is the trickster. He decided that now it's the time to stop holding on the heel of his brother, but now throw his body on the ground. And he said, sell me your birthrights. Esau did not hesitate. Do you know why? Because to animals, survival is primary goal. He sold his birthrights. He made his choice. He chose the material world. He chose the material existence instead of his divine birthrights. He traded it for food. What was the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil? It was some sort of food, something that was eatable. And that's how Esau becomes a paradigm of a falling man, who instead of choosing his heavenly birthrights, which is the tree of life, he chose the tree of knowing good and evil. He picked up its fruit, which was something material, in order to survive, to live another day. And that's how the story keeps on going. Because basically, as I told you, this story is a matrix. It's not just a historical story. You all understand that if that was objective history, we have a problem with talking snakes, you know. Do you believe the snakes talked in the past? I will tell you something that one of my teachers used to tell, that I couldn't resist but share it with others. One day, one of my teachers I believe in New Testament, told us, he said, every now and then people ask me, do you really believe in talking snakes? Because in Europe that would be a common question. Basically with this question, atheists or agnostics, they would try to ridicule Christians or Jews. Do you really believe in talking snakes? And the answer was, no, but I believe in what they're saying. Okay, so see, in the story, the question is not whether snakes can talk. The point is, what is the message? So let me tell you that in pagan cultures, the snake has been an image of eternity. Do you know why? Can you make sense of why in all religions the snake would be an image of eternity? It is long.
No, he used the false promise to when you eat tree.
No, listen to the question. Listen carefully. Why in all the world religions, especially in ancient religions, Babylonian, Persian, Assyrian, Egyptian, Canaanite, Greek, why is the snake symbol of eternity? Well, your land of snakes, you should know better. I'll tell you why. Because many snakes live in pits in the ground, right? And when they die, nobody sees this. But you know what people see? They see skins that fall off every year. So the snake can regenerate its own skin. And in antiquity, people thought that snakes do not die. Are you getting this? That's why they became symbol of eternity. That's why the Pharaoh has a cobra on his hat or whatever it was called. That was basically symbol of the divine wisdom that is given to the Pharaoh. But now think about this. Snakes in antiquity, in ancient religions, Babylonian, Persian, Assyrian, Canaanite, Phoenician, Egyptian, snakes were also believed to be the symbol of wisdom. For whatever reason. And one more thing, in some religions, the snakes were called the soul of the earth. Because they somehow come out of the earth and they are the face of the earth. So eternity, wisdom, the soul of the earth. Now, let me give you a New Testament text that says something very interesting. And now, the person who said that was the physical brother of the Lord. His name was James. And the reference is James 3 verses 13 through 15. James 3, 13 to 15. Now, this is New Testament, but you need to know that this is based on Hebrew culture and understanding of things. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him sow it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but it is earthly, unspiritual, of the devil. Now in my Bible it says it is earthly, beastly, of the devil. So according to that text, there are two kinds of wisdom. One that comes from above, and one that springs from below. One is humane, one is divine. It comes to humans as revelation, and the other wisdom is beastly. It comes as a self-approval, as a self-motivation, as self-consciousness, as egoism, as selfish desire, as brutality. It comes as rejection of the other, rudeness, violence, all this kind of stuff. See, think about this. For example, sometimes I wonder, it takes so much intelligence to create a bank and run a bank, right? All these numbers, calculations and stuff of that. You know, there's something genius behind all this. My mind cannot make it, you know. But at the same time, when you get into the core of this, all of this human endeavor is in the name of robbing people. So that is wisdom that comes from below. It is human, it is beastly, it is of the devil. So, for example, in Jewish law, the wisdom that comes from above says this: you shall never lend your brother money with interest. And you know, when you lend your brother money without interest, that never creates classes in the society in which they're rich and poor. Banks create classes, and they rob the masses. Are you getting the point? So basically, if this story was only informing us about what happened in the past, this is long time gone and it does not concern us. But if this is a matrix which helps us to decipher our present reality, we always have to think this. Where is my garden? What did the Lord reveal to me and told me to keep in the name of living happily and blissfully? What is the forbidden fruit for me? And what are the voices of the earth that speak into my ears that I should violate the commands of God? That was the point of the composition of that story. And if you don't do this, you don't know how to read the story. And when this becomes the point, then the question, can snakes speak, is absolutely irrelevant. Because you hear the voices of the snake from morning to evening. Many Jewish rabbis said that the snake is the interior evil within man. The interior innate ability to do evil that always talks into your ear. Take the shortcut. Kill him. Suppress him. Subdue him. Lie. Cheat. But do you remember how Jesus overcame that in the desert? When the voices of the earth that were called satanic there, that was already Satan, who was speaking in the fashion of the snake, he's a great imitator. He revived Jesus' bodily necessities, or reminded him actually of his bodily necessities, and said, if you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. Supply your needs, in other words. Make a trick to feed yourself. By the way, do you know that Satan always does that with great leaders? Because he knows that great leaders have the ability to create tricks and turn turn stones into bread. And do you know that many of the Christian leaders fail into that first temptation? And because they have been wandering in the desert for a very long time, they're tempted to use the power of God that is given to them for others and spend it on themselves. That's where the story becomes alive, because it's not just a history, it's a matrix that explains spiritual reality. Jesus said, a man will not live with bread alone. In other words, Jesus said, I would rather die hungry, but I would die faithful. This is something that Esau did not want to admit. He would rather live content, but without firstborn right that comes from God. And so that's how the story works in the Old Testament. So sin is always turning your back on your divine origin and divine call. Turning your back on divine principles in the name of food, of survival. And awakening animal-like instincts within you instead of searching for heavenly truth and establishing justice. That has always been the case in the Old Testament. So, yes?
These are incidents that happens in Esau, Jacob's story, and Adam's story and Jesus' story. So, but we fail continuously. We do this continuously.
Yes.
Day-to-day life. So how does this work in us? So once we fall in?
Well, these are emblematic stories. They're just like signs on the road. You know, you don't have signs on the road every 5 centimeters to remind you one and the same thing, right? Every now and then you get a sign on the main road that you have the right of way. Every now and then. And between signs, you need to keep the memory of the sign, right? So basically, these are posts on the road as we travel, and they are to remind us or to warn us, right? So basically, those signs are given to us to show us how we fell and how we raise. Well, in the Old Testament, we have only stories of failure. In the New Testament, we have the story of us being raised through Christ, in Christ. Who is the second? Adam. So Jesus is the man, the God-man, but the man who overcomes his biological necessities and who overcomes human desire for domination, which is also animal-like. Again, that's why the great emperors of the great empires, they're presented to us in the apocalyptic literature as beasts. Why? Because they want to devour, they want to tear apart, they want to smash. That's their natural craving. And that's why the emperor of Rome in the first century, when John had the revelation, he's called beast, and then he's contrasted with the lamb. Who is the lamb? Our Savior. Our Savior. Who is not a wild animal, who is very meek. So you need to see this contrast, lamb and beast. Right? And now these are descriptions of how things look from within. It's a description of a spiritual state of being. Jesus did not look like a hairy lamb whose throat was cut off before the throne of God. Plus, there is a great play of words, because in Aramaic language, the word lamb is the same word as servant. So what John sees in front of the throne of God is the servant who was killed for us, Isaiah 53. And there in this chapter, he was compared with a lamb. So he looked like a lamb. But again, the Hebrew and Aramaic language allow play of words. He's the humble servant who allowed to be killed. He's the martyr before God, whose death speaks of a great injustice and allows God to destroy the systems that execute justice in this world, religious and secular, Jewish and Roman. It's quite complicated. But again, you need to understand that the Bible is more than a message of morality. It's a message that helps us understand how systems work in our world. And see, the problem is that today in church we only talk about morality, how people should live. But we don't address the evil systems that the animal-like people around us have built, that suppress people, that tear them to pieces, that rob them of their dignity and money. We don't talk about the pharmaceutical industry, we don't talk about banks, we don't talk about exploration of human labor, we don't talk about human trafficking, we don't talk about drug dealing. We don't address those issues as if they're not around us. And yet we're the prophetic consciousness of this world. And I'll tell you why. It's because we read the Bible very selectively. Let me show you how we read the Bible selectively. I keep on going about this human nature and how we fall. I'm already into the topic of sin, what sin is. Sin is basically over-identifying yourself with your earthly nature. Thinking of yourself as a biological unit that needs to be fed, that needs to be comforted, and that has to live well through this life. Turning your back on your spirituality and morality. So, there are two examples of great humans who fell just like Adam, that prove the fact that the story about Adam was not only about the particular being that lived in the beginning, but it is the story of all human beings and how we all fall. So one of the stories is the story of the king of Babylon. And the prophecy against the king of Babylon comes in the book of Isaiah, chapter 14. Now, I'm talking about how humans fall, the same way Adam did. Now, Isaiah is speaking a prophecy addressed to the king of Babylon, who will one day become the person who will enslave the people of Judah. So this is prophecy that addresses a situation that has not yet happened. Babylon is not yet the great world power. It's about to rise. But the prophet sees before it rises how it falls, because it has risen itself too high. At this point of history, it is Assyria who is a world dominating power. But here we have a prophecy against Babylon. And now, it goes like this. From verse 3 onwards, the prophet starts speaking against the king of Babylon. And the first thing he says is this: how the oppressor has come to an end. How this fury has ended. The Lord has broken the rod of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, which in anger struck down peoples with unleashing blows, and in fury subdued nations with relentless aggression. You should not miss these words. They're part of the message to a king, why God is taking him down. Even the pine trees and the cedars of Lebanon exult over you and say, now that you have been laid low, no woodsman comes to cut us down. Okay? And so, later on, you're more familiar with the text because it talks about this morning star in verse 12, called Lucifer in the Latin translation, or son of the dawn, literally, who has been cast down to the earth. And you see the description. The descriptions. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. Now, according to that prophecy, the king of Babylon is taken down. The king of Babylon is taken down because of his aggression and brutality. And later on in the second part of the prophecy, you will see how the kings who are in the grave, that he has slain, ridicule him because he falls in the grave as well, right? Like one of them. And they say, is this the man who destroyed the earth, the desolated kingdoms and stuff like that? So basically, God is putting him down because of the violent behavior he has. And you know, it's interesting that in some other prophecies, God looks at Nebuchadnezzar, for example, as an instrument of God's desire to punish the nations. So basically, on one hand, his expansion has to do with God's will. But you know what doesn't have to do with God's will? How he expands. He expands his kingdom incredibly aggressively, brutally. He brutalizes the nations, and that has never been the will of God. Right? Coca-Cola is one way of expanding culture. Selling weapons is another. Do we agree? Right? And so this king hears from the prophet that he'll be taken down. Why? Because he's extremely violent, and God hates violence. He has become like a wild animal that devours everything he sees. So it's not his expansion, his influence. It's his brutality that brings him down. Who is brutal in nature? The animals. But humans have to create justice and peace if that is possible. There are many ways of expanding the culture. And the Babylonian way was the wrong way. That's why Babylon fell. Tea break.